We're here with Graeme Addison, who is a South African journalist and who organized this trip for us. We're at the Hector Peterson Memorial in Soweto. Graeme, tell us about your connection to this place.
Well, first of all, let's orientate you. Behind me is the suburb of Orlando, and on the other side is also part of Orlando, and you can see the Orlando power station, those two great big water cooling towers. Now, on the 16th of June 1976, school children from all over Soweto were marching to this place, which was their rendezvous point, because they were planning to protest against the use of Afrikaans in the schools, the forced use of Afrikaans in the schools. They were carrying banners that said things like Afrikaans, the language of the oppressor, away with Afrikaans. And these children had been influenced by the ideas of Stephen Biko, the leader of the Black Consciousness movement. Very little was known about how the children had organized themselves. They were youngsters, aged between about 9 and 18 years old, and they were converging here. And the police in the area, whose job it was to keep law and order, were completely taken by surprise, and the police panicked. Now, behind me, in those days, the street was nothing like as busy as it is at the moment. And you can see down there's a line of trees where these flagpoles are, and further down there were a lot of blue gum trees, and the police gathered themselves there and essentially I think that they were surrounded. Now, the role of these police, both black and white, as apartheid police, was to make sure that no disturbances occurred in these massive black townships. And so when the spontaneous demonstration erupted, they decided that they'd better do something about it, and they opened fire on the kids. Initially with rubber bullets, tear gas, and then finally with live ammunition. And I was on the scene because I'd come out here as a white journalist from the Star, which is the main newspaper in Johannesburg, to discover why it was that the town's refuse collection had stopped working. The youngsters in the previous few weeks before the uprising had begun to overturn and burn rubbish collection trucks and also put barricades across roads. Now, I was the environmental reporter for the Star, and so I just happened to choose June the 16th, 1976, a Wednesday, for the day that I decided to come out here, and I walked straight into a revolution, much to my own surprise. There were very few black journalists on any of the newspapers, and the Star didn't know that there was about to be this demonstration. So when I got here, the children were still marching, nothing had happened, they were marching peacefully, they weren't armed, and I actually arrived on that street over there and came up this way and saw the police beginning to line themselves up, and decided to go off in that direction to find the children who were going to be marching, because that is Orlando West High School down there, which was really the epicenter of the demonstrations. That is where it was being planned. So I went off in that direction, and as I drove down there in my little white Volkswagen, there was shooting behind me. I skidded to a halt, I turned round, and at that point the children were running in all directions. There was tear gas everywhere, there was a lot of screaming, a lot of panic, and a lot of really angry shouting from some of the older youngsters. And as they ran past me, some of them said, "Run, run, the police are shooting." I didn't see the shooting of any of the kids, I didn't see any of the casualties that day, but it was quite obvious to me that something really bad was happening here. And that was in the days before cell phones, and very few Soweto houses had telephones of any kind. Well, it was obvious that I had to contact my office and tell them there was trouble, that they needed to send more journalists out here, photographers, and I ran down the road, knocking on doors and saying to the occupants, "Have you got a telephone?" "No, we haven't, but there is a street down there where there's a lady with a telephone." So I drove off down that street. I asked my way down, it was quite some distance, and when I got there, somebody said, "Yes, you can go into that house there, that's Bishop Tutu's house. They've got a telephone." So I ran into the house, and there was his wife, Leah, standing there, and I said, "I'm from the Star, can I use your phone?" She said, "Yes, you can." I used the phone, I phoned the office, and within a few minutes after that, the phone went dead. Why? Whether it was cut by the police, whether it was simply a failure of the phone, I don't know. But the police gathered themselves there, and they began to overturn and burn rubbish collection trucks and also put barricades across roads. Now, I was the environmental reporter for the Star, and I I had told the news editor what was going on. I then went out into the street and started to interview some of the children. They didn't know what had happened. I didn't know what would happen. But it was clear that the students were turning angry. They were picking up stones and they were rallying and going to go back and throw stones at the police. And I then went around the other side, down the same street that I'd followed to Bishop Tutu's house, also past Mandela's house, across to the other side where the police main contingent was, led by a white policeman who I think was a guy called Roy Rus Swanepoel, the Red Russian. He had ginger hair, he was a real thug, and later on, years later, he was indicted by the United Nations for crimes against humanity. He was the cop in charge on the scene, I think, and I went up to him and I said, "What's going on here?" And he said, "We know as little as you." But their communications weren't very good. And perhaps they didn't know that the police up here had panicked and opened fire and were shooting. Meantime, we began to see columns of smoke rising over some of the beer halls. The beer halls were a big target because they were regarded as the place where the government generated money for its administration. And the children made an alliance with the Tsotsis, or the gangsters in the streets. And what then erupted was a people's revolution. They attacked all the targets, the police stations, the beer halls, the administration offices, and within a couple of hours most of these places were burning. What I saw here on the 16th of June was frightening, but it was confusing. It was not clear to anybody, especially me, because I didn't know the area very well, what had actually happened. But in the few hours after the initial shootings, the kids turned on the police. They attacked and killed an old white administration official called Leon Edelstein, who was actually quite a good guy and had been doing a doctorate on community development in the townships. He was just an unfortunate victim who got in their way. And I know that a couple of police dogs were stoned to death. Some of the photographs from those days were extremely dramatic, and the picture that you see here at the memorial of young Hector Peterson being carried out was taken by a photographer called Sam Nzima of the Sowetan newspaper. In those days, I think it was the World newspaper. It became the Sowetan later. And that picture, of course, went all around the world. It also went all around this country, and that was partly the reason why, within the next few days, the entire country erupted in violence, because the same issues affected townships all over the country.